For over a century, FC Barcelona has lived by a single motto: Més que un club. But behind the romantic ideal, behind the chants echoing through the Camp Nou, hides a financial reality so fragile that even that motto began to crack. When Joan Laporta returned to power in 2021, he inherited not a football empire, but a financial time bomb. The club was drowning in debt, more than 1.3 billion euros, a figure so large that it eclipsed the GDP of some small nations. Their wage bill had become the highest in Europe, and yet their results were in free fall. The world watched in disbelief as Barcelona, once the model of success and stability, couldn't even renew Lionel Messi's contract, the very man who was Barcelona. It wasn't a lack of love, it was a lack of liquidity. La Liga's strict financial fair play rules sealed their fate. Unless the club slashed costs, they couldn't register new players. In the summer of 2021, Messi walked out of the Camp Nou in tears, while Laporta faced cameras trying to explain the unthinkable, that Barcelona had become too poor to keep its king. From that moment, a war began. A war not on the pitch but in the boardroom, a desperate fight to save a club that had built its legacy on ideals but now had to survive on leverage. With the walls closing in, Joan Laporta unveiled what would later be called the Leverage Plan, a financial operation so audacious that it split the football world in two. To some, it was genius, a bold, modern rescue mission. To others, it was desperation disguised as innovation. Barcelona began selling pieces of their future to survive the present. First, they sold 10% of their La Liga TV rights for the next 25 years to the American investment firm Sixth Street in exchange for immediate cash. Weeks later, they sold another 15%. Then came Barça Studios, the club's in-house media arm, partly sold to Socios.com and Orpheus Media. Each sale brought in hundreds of millions, but also stripped away parts of the club's autonomy. Laporta called these operations economic levers. He insisted they weren't giving up the club's soul, only activating its assets. The idea was simple: monetize everything that could be monetized, brand, content, stadium rights, and in doing so, buy time to rebuild. Yet beneath the optimism lay a darker truth. Every euro earned today came from income that Barcelona would no longer have tomorrow. They weren't printing money, they were borrowing from their own future. And in football, as in finance, debt is never just numbers, it's time running out. When Laporta presented the levers, he didn't just sell TV rights or media assets, he sold the illusion of safety. The numbers looked better, the headlines grew softer, and for the first time in years, Barca fans dared to dream again. They called it a rebirth, they called it economic recovery. But beneath the surface, the foundations were trembling. With the influx of cash, Barcelona went on a shopping spree. Robert Lewandowski, Rafinha, Jules Koundé, the club that had just been bankrupt, was suddenly spending like royalty again. Critics called it irresponsible, Laporta called it ambition. His reasoning was that Barcelona couldn't afford to stop being competitive because relevance itself was currency. But the short-term glamour masked long-term decay. The levers were temporary oxygen for a club still gasping. Every major sponsor, from Spotify, who bought naming rights to Camp Nou, to Nike, who threatened to terminate their contract, knew that Barcelona's financial tightrope was getting thinner. The club's income streams depended on unpredictable variables: sporting success, global attention, and hope. Meanwhile, La Liga president Javier Tebas kept tightening the noose with spending caps and registration restrictions. For every lever Laporta pulled, Tebas answered with new financial controls. It became a chess game: politics versus pride, law versus legacy. Yet Barcelona continued forward. Laporta promised that once the new Spotify Camp Nou opened, it would be the heartbeat of the next century. But everyone inside the boardroom knew the truth. Until that stadium opened, Barcelona was living month to month, surviving on anticipation. For decades, the Camp Nou was Barcelona's cathedral, a monument to history, glory, and identity. But by 2023, it had become something else entirely, a financial burden the club could no longer ignore. Crumbling concrete, outdated infrastructure, and lost matchday revenues turned it from an icon into a liability. Laporta's solution was both visionary and dangerous: rebuild it completely, financed almost entirely through debt. The project, called Espai Barça, carried a staggering price tag of 1.45 billion euros, the largest stadium renovation in football history. To fund it, Laporta secured financing from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, promising repayment through future ticket sales, sponsorships, and hospitality deals. On paper, it was a masterstroke, the modernization of a global landmark. In reality, it was another lever disguised as progress. During construction, Barcelona was forced to abandon Camp Nou and play at the Montjuic Olympic Stadium, reducing their home game attendance by nearly half. That meant lower ticket sales, less atmosphere, and fewer matchday revenues. exactly when they needed money the most. It was an unavoidable paradox. To save the club's future, they had to sacrifice its present. The promise of the new Spotify Camp Nou became the club's new religion. Animated renders and glossy campaigns showed holographic tunnels, 360-degree screens, luxury boxes for sponsors. But every month costs kept rising, interest rates increased, construction delays spread anxiety through the board. The club had bet everything on a dream of tomorrow, while the reality of today kept knocking at their door louder each season. The irony of Barcelona's crisis was that, even as they bled financially, their image remained priceless. Sponsors still lined up to be associated with the club's history, its aesthetic, its idea of football as art. The Spotify naming rights deal alone brought in around €280 million, making it one of the largest partnerships in European football. Yet even that wasn't enough to plug the holes. The club's accounts were a patchwork of optimism and obligation. To the public, Laporta insisted that Barca was on the right path, projecting calm and confidence. But inside the boardroom, every meeting began with the same question: how long can we keep this up? The team's sporting directorate had to negotiate transfers like chess moves, signing promising young players such as Pedri, Gavi, and Fermin Lopez, not just for their talent but for their low salaries. Each sale or renewal was part of a delicate equation. One miscalculation, and La Liga would block player registrations again. Meanwhile, UEFA's financial monitoring grew stricter, forcing Barcelona to justify every euro spent. The club was still paying debts from past transfers: Philippe Coutinho, Antoine Griezmann, Miralem Pjanic, ghosts of the Bartomeu era that haunted every balance sheet. And yet, despite the weight of numbers, the brand of Barcelona continued to shine. The club's digital following surpassed 400 million fans, their global academy programs expanded, and their women's team dominated Europe. It was a paradox, a club that appeared rich in everything except money. As Laporta often said, "We are not selling dreams, we are financing belief." But belief, like debt, compounds over time, and eventually, someone has to pay the interest. Behind every decision, every loan, sale, or sponsorship, lurked forces far bigger than football. The European Central Bank's interest rates, the global energy market, even the fluctuations in tourism all indirectly shaped Barcelona's survival. The club had become a case study in globalization, a local institution trapped in the machinery of global finance. While Laporta sold levers, hedge funds bought influence. Sixth Street, Goldman Sachs, and a network of investors gained access to one of the world's most powerful brands. They weren't fans, they were financiers. Every televised goal, every Spotify stream, every shirt sold at an airport duty-free shop now contributed to debt repayment. Football, once about loyalty, was now a collateralized asset. Inside La Liga headquarters, Javier Tebas used Barcelona's crisis as proof that his strict regulations were necessary. He saw himself as the guardian of Spanish football's economic integrity, but to Barca's board, he was the executioner tightening the rope. The two men, Tebas and Laporta, became ideological opposites, one preaching austerity, the other gambling on grandeur. Outside Spain, rivals watched closely. Real Madrid thrived under Florentino Perez, whose conservative spending and strategic commercial deals kept them profitable. It was a painful contrast, the two titans of Spanish football, once equals, now playing different games entirely, one defending tradition, the other mortgaging it. By late 2024, whispers began circulating among analysts. If revenues didn't rebound, if the stadium didn't open on schedule, Barcelona could face insolvency again within 5 years. For the first time, the unthinkable seemed plausible, that Maison Keon Club might one day mean less than sustainable. Joan Laporta had always been a man of contradictions, a lawyer who thought like a gambler, a romantic who treated risk as destiny. To his supporters, he was the savior who dared to act when others froze. To his critics, he was the salesman of false hope. Yet both sides agreed on one thing: no one could charm chaos quite like Laporta. His doctrine was simple: keep the illusion alive long enough for it to become reality. If the club appeared stable, investors would believe it was stable. If sponsors believed in the dream, they would fund the dream. And if the fans believed in him, the entire illusion would hold together for one more season. Every press conference was theater. Laporta smiled, joked, deflected, and reframed disaster as evolution. When journalists asked about the €1.3 billion debt, he countered with new deals, digital initiatives, and slogans about the club's global vision. His greatest weapon wasn't finance, it was persuasion. In truth, Laporta understood something fundamental. Football today is not governed by trophies, but by narratives. The stronger the story, the more valuable the brand. Barcelona's debt wasn't just a liability, it was a storyline of struggle, resilience, and rebirth. Yet beneath his charisma, the math never lied. Each month's relief came at next month's expense. The levers had bought time, not transformation. And the danger with illusions is that when they break, they don't fade quietly, they shatter. Still, Laporta doubled down. He wasn't managing a club anymore, he was managing faith, and faith in modern football had become the most volatile currency of all. When the lights finally return to the new Spotify Camp Nou, the crowd will sing the same words they've always sung, Mais qu'un club. But this time, the meaning will be different. It will no longer just be a statement of pride, it will be a question of endurance. So what does it mean to be more than a club, when survival itself becomes the victory? Subscribe, like, and tell me, did Barcelona save its legacy or just postpone the collapse?